The Sands Hotel Copa Room was bathed in amber light on the evening of March 23rd, 1963. Dean Martin stood at the microphone in his impeccable tuxedo, a glass of what everyone assumed was whiskey sitting on the piano beside him. The room held maybe 2,600 people that night, all of them dressed to the nines. All of them there to see the king of cool do what he did best. Dean was halfway through Everybody Loves Somebody. His voice smooth as aged bourbon, that effortless quality that made singing look like the easiest thing in the world. The audience was with him completely, swaying gently, some couples holding hands, some of their eyes closed just listening. This was vintage Dean Martin, relaxed, charming, making you feel like he was singing just for you. The orchestra was in perfect sync, the lighting was flawless, and Dean was in his element. He just hit a particularly beautiful phrase when a sound cut through the music. Not a heckle, not applause, something else entirely. A woman's voice, desperate and breaking. "Please, Mr. Martin, please." Dean stopped singing mid-verse. The band, confused, kept playing for a few bars before trailing off into silence. 2,600 people turned to look at the source of the disruption. In the third row, slightly left of center, a woman in her 30s was standing, her face streaked with tears, one hand raised. Next to her sat a small boy, maybe 7 years old, thin in a way that spoke of illness, wearing a suit that seemed too big for his fragile frame. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and even from the stage, you could see how weak he was. He was looking at Dean Martin with eyes that held something beyond admiration. They held hope. The security guards were already moving toward the woman, ready to escort her out. This was the Sands Hotel. This was Dean Martin. You didn't interrupt the show. But Dean raised his hand, stopping them in their tracks. "Hold on," he said into the microphone, his voice gentle. Then to the woman, "Ma'am, what's wrong?" The woman's voice shook as she spoke, loud enough for the front sections to hear. "My son, Tommy. He's dying, Mr. Martin. The doctors said he has maybe weeks left. His only wish was to see you sing. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I needed you to know he's here. That's all. I just needed you to know." The room was absolutely silent. This wasn't heckling. This wasn't a drunk patron causing trouble. This was a mother, desperate and heartbroken, making one last plea for her dying child. Dean set down his microphone and walked to the edge of the stage. He knelt down, getting as close to the third row as he could, and looked directly at the boy. "What's your name, pal?" The boy's voice was barely audible, but in that silence, everyone heard it. "Tommy. Tommy Brennan." "Tommy Brennan," Dean repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "How old are you, Tommy?" 7.5, the boy said, and there was a hint of pride in his voice at the half, the way kids always insist on counting every month when they're young. Dean stood up and turned to his orchestra conductor. "Take 5, fellas." Then to the audience, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short intermission. Get yourselves a drink. Stretch your legs. We'll be back in a bit." He walked to the edge of the stage and spoke to his stage manager. "Bring the Brennan family backstage. All of them. And make sure nobody bothers us." Then Dean Martin walked off the stage, leaving 2,600 confused but silent patrons sitting in their seats, and headed to his dressing room. What Dean did next wasn't calculated for publicity. There were no cameras in his dressing room that night. No reporters. What happened in the next 20 minutes? The world would only know because the Brennan family told the story later, and because Dean's stage manager, a man named Richie Avalon, witnessed it and wrote about it in his memoirs 30 years later. Dean's dressing room at the Sands was nice, but not ostentatious. A couch, a makeup mirror with lights, a rack of tuxedos, a small bar, pictures on a wall of Dean with Frank, with Sammy, with Jerry Lewis from the old days. It smelled like cigarettes and expensive cologne. When the Brennans were brought in, Tommy's mother Margaret was apologizing profusely. "Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have shouted out like that. We've been trying to get tickets for months, and when we finally got them, I promised Tommy he'd see you, and I was so afraid you wouldn't know he was there, wouldn't know what it meant." "Mrs. Brennan," Dean interrupted gently, "you've got nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all. He knelt down in front of Tommy, who was sitting on the couch, looking small and tired. The boy's father, Robert, stood behind his wife, a hand on her shoulder, trying to hold himself together. "Tommy," Dean said, "your mom says you want to see me sing. Is that right?" Tommy nodded, his eyes wide. "You're my favorite. I listen to your records every day. My dad got me all of them, even the old ones with Jerry Lewis." Dean smiled. "The old ones, huh?" I'm not sure whether to be flattered or feel ancient. He sat down on the couch next to Tommy. "What's your favorite song, pal?" "Return to Me," Tommy said without hesitation. "The one that goes, return to me." "Ah, the Italian one." Dean said, "Your mom told me you're not feeling so good. You want to talk about it?" Tommy shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for a 7-year-old. "I've got leukemia. The doctors say there's nothing they can do. They gave me medicine for a while, but it made me sick, so we stopped. Mom cries a lot, but she tries to hide it." The simple honesty of it broke something in the room. Margaret Brennan covered her face with her hands. Robert pulled her close. Dean reached out and put his hand on Tommy's shoulder. "I'm real sorry, Tommy. That's not fair. You're just a kid. You should be playing baseball and getting in trouble and doing kid stuff." "I used to play baseball," Tommy said. "I wasn't very good, but I liked it. Now I get too tired." Dean was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what? I think you and I should hang out for a bit. Just us guys. Would that be okay with you?" Tommy's face lit up in a way that made him look less sick. More like the 7-year-old boy he should have been allowed to be. Really, Dean said. He looked at Margaret and Robert. "Would you folks mind if Tommy and I had a few minutes? There's coffee and sandwiches in the green room next door. Richie here will take you. I promise I'll take good care of your boy." The Brennans hesitated, but something in Dean's face told them this was important. They kissed Tommy and left him alone with Dean Martin. According to Richie Avalon's account, what happened next was this. Dean sat with Tommy on that couch, and they talked. Not about dying, not about illness, just about life. Dean asked Tommy about school, about his friends, about what he wanted to be when he grew up. Tommy said he wanted to be a singer like Dean. Dean told him he had the perfect face for show business, that the camera would love him. Then Dean said, "You know what, Tommy? I'm going to sing for you. Just for you. No microphone, no big audience, just me and you. What do you say?" Tommy nodded, unable to speak. Dean pulled over a chair, sat across from Tommy, and began to sing Return to Me. But he didn't sing it like he did on stage. He sang it quietly, intimately, like a lullaby. He sang it in Italian and English, and he sang it directly to this dying 7-year-old boy, giving him something that nobody else in the world had, a private performance from Dean Martin. When he finished, Tommy had tears running down his face. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," he whispered. "You know what, pal?" Dean said, "I've sung that song 1,000 times. In clubs, on TV, in recording studios. But I don't think I've ever sung it better than I just did for you. You bring out the best in me, Tommy Brennan." Tommy smiled, a real smile, the kind that reaches eyes despite everything. Then Dean said, "I've got an idea. How would you like to come back out on stage with me? You and me will finish the show together. Would you like that?" Tommy's eyes went wide. "On stage? With you? With me?" Dean confirmed. "We're partners now. What do you say?" "Yes," Tommy said, his voice stronger than it had been all night. "Yes, please." Dean called for Tommy's parents, explained the plan. Margaret was worried, afraid it would be too much for Tommy, but the look on her son's face told her this was exactly what he needed. They agreed. 15 minutes after he'd left the stage, Dean Martin walked back into the Copa Room. But this time, he wasn't alone. He was carrying Tommy Brennan in his arms. The audience, which had been murmuring and wondering what was happening, fell silent. Dean walked to the center of the stage, Tommy held securely against his chest. The boy weighed almost nothing, light as a whisper. Dean stood at the microphone and adjusted it with one hand, the other arm supporting Tommy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice different now, more serious, more real than the cool persona he usually projected. I want to introduce you to my new friend. This is Tommy Brennan. He's 7.5 years old, and he's the bravest person I've ever met. The audience was transfixed. You could have heard a pin drop. Tommy here is fighting a battle that most of us can't imagine, Dean continued. And he's fighting it with more courage than I've ever seen. His mother told me tonight that Tommy's final wish was to see me perform. Well, Tommy, I've got a better idea. How about we perform together? He looked down at Tommy. Is that okay with you, partner? Tommy nodded, his small hand gripping Dean's tuxedo jacket. Dean turned to his orchestra. Gentlemen, return to me, nice and slow. The music started, that beautiful melody that Dean had made famous. And Dean began to sing. But this time, he sang differently. He sang with Tommy in his arms, looking down at the boy occasionally, making it clear who he was singing to. His voice was tender in a way it had never been before, every word carrying the weight of the moment. Halfway through the song, Dean lowered the microphone to Tommy's level. You know this one, Tommy? Tommy, his voice thin but determined, sang along with Dean for a few phrases. Ritornami, car mia ti amo. The audience was crying. Not some of them. Not many of them. All of them. Hardened Vegas gamblers, sophisticated socialites, celebrities who had seen everything. All of them were weeping openly as they watched Dean Martin cradle a dying 7-year-old boy and sing to him like he was the only person in the world. When the song ended, Dean didn't let go of Tommy. He kept holding him, kept him there in his arms, and spoke to the audience again. I've been performing for more than 20 years, Dean said. I've sung in nightclubs and concert halls, on television and in movies. I performed for presidents and kings. But I have never, in all those years, felt more honored to be on a stage than I do right now, holding this brave young man. He looked down at Tommy. Thank you for coming to see me tonight, Tommy. Thank you for reminding me what this is all about. It's not about being cool or getting applause. It's about connecting with people. It's about making someone feel something real. You've given me more than I could ever give you, partner. The standing ovation started before Dean even finished speaking. 2,600 people rose to their feet, applauding not just for Dean, but for Tommy, for courage, for the moment they were witnessing. The ovation lasted 7 minutes. Some people said it was the longest standing ovation in the history of the Sands Hotel. Dean carried Tommy back to his parents, who were crying so hard they could barely stand. He gently handed Tommy to his father and hugged Margaret. Your boy is something special, Mrs. Brennan. You should be very proud. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you for giving him this, for seeing him. It was my privilege, Dean said, and he meant it. The show continued after that. But everyone knew that what came next was just epilogue. The real performance, the one that mattered, had already happened. Dean sang a few more songs, told a few jokes, but there was a different energy to him now. Something had shifted. The story of that night spread quickly through Las Vegas and then through the entertainment world. But what most people didn't know was what happened in the months that followed. Tommy Brennan had been given weeks to live, maybe a month at most. The leukemia was aggressive, untreatable with the medicine available in 1963. His parents had been preparing themselves to lose him, had been trying to make his last days as comfortable and meaningful as possible. But something changed after that night at the Sands. Tommy lived for 7 more months. Not weeks, months. He was still sick, still dying, but something in him had shifted. He had energy he hadn't had before. He smiled more. He talked about the night on stage with Dean Martin constantly, reliving every moment, every word. Dean didn't forget Tommy either. He called the Brennan home once a week to talk to Tommy. Sometimes they'd talk for 5 minutes, sometimes for half an hour. Dean would tell Tommy about his shows, ask about Tommy's day, sing him bits of songs over the phone. Once, he sent Tommy a record player and every album he'd ever made, with a note that said, "From my partner in show business." When Tommy had good days, when he had the energy, his father would play those records and Tommy would sing along, pretending he was on stage with Dean again. Margaret Brennan later said that those 7 months were a gift beyond measure. Instead of watching her son fade away in fear and pain, She got to watch him live with joy. He talked about the future, even though they all knew he didn't have one. He made plans. He dreamed. He was, for those months, a boy again instead of a dying patient. On October 12, 1963, Tommy Brennan passed away in his sleep. He was holding a photograph that Dean had sent him, a picture of the two of them on stage that night. Dean holding Tommy, both of them smiling. When Dean heard the news, he canceled his performances for 3 days. He flew to Tommy's hometown of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and attended the funeral. He sat with the Brennan family, hugged them, cried with them. At the service, Dean stood up and spoke. He told everyone there about meeting Tommy, about their time backstage, about singing together. He told them that Tommy had taught him something crucial about what it meant to be an entertainer. I thought I knew what performing was about. Dean said, his voice rough with emotion. I thought it was about talent, about putting on a show, about making people forget their troubles for a couple hours. But Tommy taught me different. He taught me that the real power of what we do, the real purpose, is to touch people, to make them feel seen, valued, loved. That night on stage with Tommy, I wasn't Dean Martin the entertainer. I was just a man trying to give a little boy one moment of joy. And that's when I realized that's what I should be doing every time I step on a stage. Every song should be sung like I'm singing it to Tommy. Every performance should be done with that kind of purpose. He paused, composing himself. Tommy Brennan lived 7 years and 7 months. That's not nearly enough. That's not fair. But in those 7 months after we met, I got to watch him live fully. I got to be part of his story. And he became part of mine. I'm a better performer because of Tommy. I'm a better man because of Tommy. And I'll carry him with me every time I walk on a stage for the rest of my life. The transformation in Dean Martin after Tommy's death was noticeable to those who knew him well. He still projected that cool, casual persona on stage, still made it look effortless. But there was something deeper now, something more intentional. He started doing more charity work, particularly with children's hospitals. He never publicized it, never used it for good press. He would just show up at hospitals, walk into children's wards, and sing for sick kids. Sometimes for an hour, sometimes for a whole afternoon. No cameras, no reporters, just Dean and children who needed to feel special. His performances changed too. He was more present, more connected to his audience. Other performers noticed it. Frank Sinatra once asked him what was different, and Dean told him about Tommy. That kid reminded me that every person in the audience is a real person with real struggles. Dean said, they're not just faces in a crowd. They're Tommies, every one of them, and they deserve the best I can give them. Dean kept a photograph of himself and Tommy on the mirror in every dressing room he used for the rest of his career. When people asked about it, he'd tell them the story, and he never told it without his voice catching, without his eyes getting wet. In 1964, Dean recorded an album called The Door Is Still Open to My Heart. The final track on the album was Return to Me, but it was different from any previous version he'd recorded. It was slower, more tender, more personal. In the liner notes, Dean dedicated the song to Tommy Brennan, my partner. Years later, in an interview with Barbara Walters in 1978, she asked Dean about the most important performance of his career. Without hesitation, he said, March 23, 1963, at the Sands Hotel, I sang Return to Me with a 7-year-old boy named Tommy Brennan. Everything else I've done, all the hit records and the movies and the TV shows, they're just my job. But that night with Tommy, that was my purpose. The legacy of that night extends beyond Dean Martin's transformation. It became a reminder to everyone in show business about what entertainment could be at its best. Not an escape, not a distraction, but a connection. A way of making people feel valued, seen, loved. Other performers started to incorporate acts of kindness into their shows. Elvis Presley famously stopped concerts to acknowledge fans who were ill or struggling. Frank Sinatra increased his charity work. The entertainment industry slowly began to understand that fame and talent carried a responsibility to use those gifts for more than just profit. Tommy Brennan's parents, Margaret and Robert, create a foundation in their son's name that helped families dealing with childhood terminal illness. They provided financial assistance, emotional support, and one special service. They arranged for entertainers to visit sick children, to give them moments of joy in the midst of suffering. Dean Martin was the first reformer to volunteer, and he remained involved with the foundation until his death in 1995. The story of Dean Martin stopping his concert for Tommy Brennan became legend, but it was a kind of legend that mattered, not because it was flashy or spectacular, but because it was real. It was about a man who had everything, all the fame and success anyone could want, recognizing that none of it meant anything compared to the chance to comfort a dying child. March 23, 1963. Dean Martin stopped performing, walked off stage, spent time with a terminally ill 7-year-old boy, then carried him back into the spotlight and sang to him in front of thousands. 2,600 people witnessed it in person. Millions have heard the story since. But the number that matters most is one. One little boy who got to feel special, who got to live his dream, who got months of extra life filled with joy instead of despair. One boy who reminded one of the world's greatest entertainers what truly mattered. That's not just a performance worth remembering. That's a life worth celebrating. That's what it means to use your gifts for something bigger than yourself. Tommy Brennan taught Dean Martin that lesson, and Dean spent the rest of his life trying to live up to it. That's the real power of music, of entertainment, of human connection. Not the applause or the accolades, but the ability to look at someone who's suffering and say, I see you, you matter, and I'm going to give you something beautiful to hold on to. Dean Martin did that for Tommy Brennan, and in doing so, he showed all of us what it means to be truly great. Not talented, not famous. Great. That's a standard worth reaching for. That's a legacy worth having. That's what happened the night Dean Martin stopped his concert for a dying 7-year-old boy. And why 2,600 people cried. And why we're still talking about it today. Because some moments transcend entertainment. Some moments become something sacred. That night at the Sands Hotel was one of those moments. And Tommy Brennan, 7 years old, dying from leukemia, got to be at the center of it. Got to be seen. Got to be valued. Got to be loved. That's what Dean Martin gave him. That's what we should all aspire to give each other. Every single day we're here.